I will be forever the myth.
You're the king of kings, man.
There's always a pecking order. The little packers never mess with the big packers. So I'm a rooster, and he's a chicken, so to speak.
All right, welcome back to the Bodybuilding Legends Podcast. I have two special guests with me today. I have Jerry Brainum, who's been joining us the last few weeks, talking about our year in review shows. And we also have our special guest, Shawn Ray, we're going to talk about the 1993 Mr. Olympia on this episode. And Shawn was, of course, a part of the 1993 Mr. Olympia. He took third place. I think that was probably your fifth Mr. Olympia, right, Shawn?
Yeah, it was 88, 90, 91, 92, 93. So it was my fifth.
Yeah, I nailed it. All right. Well, of course, this contest was Dorian's second Mr. Olympia win. And Dorian was really improved this year. He was 257. He was 15 pounds heavier than the year before when he won it in Helsinki. And Shawn, you moved up in the placings. You were in fourth place in 1992, and then you moved up to third place. And every year you moved up until you got to second. So tell us a little bit about the 93 Olympia going into it. You took the whole year off. I think you said I read some magazine reports, you and Dorian, I think, were the only two that trained specifically for the Olympia all year.
Yeah, so in 92, the last time the Mr. Olympia was held outside of the country of the United States, I'd flown to Finland. Dorian won his first Olympia. And of course, Kevin Levrone was making his debut and got second place. I was in a different headspace. I had John Little was in my ear and a few others after prejudging that I had nailed it. I improved significantly from 91, which was a busy year for me. I got this trophy behind me at the Arnold Classic in 91, slipped down to fifth place in 91 from third in 1990. But in Helsinki, Finland, I showed up significantly drier, and that was working to my favor, especially when I was up there by myself. We saw Vince Taylor had slipped from the 91 Olympia from third place. He was waterlogged. That's the year he came on with the patch. Remember the patch, Jerry?
Mm-hmm.
It's the Pirate ever since. He used to be this Quiet Storm. Then I switched his name to the Pirate. But in 92, I'll use a word from the late Peter McGough. The synchronicity of my physique had arrived. I felt like I was as dry as I'd ever been. And I saw some things that I hadn't displayed on my physique, especially from the back, double bicep. I think that was my most improved pose. And in my mind, it was like the Olympias are one from the back. And when I stand next to Labrada, he's going to feel this improvement. And unfortunately, I wound up in fourth place behind Labrada's third place. But I had my sights set on Labrada. I always felt if I could beat Labrada, I could be in the conversation. Because again, in 1990, he was second place. Mm-hmm. And in 1991, he was fourth and I was fifth. So Labrada was the guy I was going to beat. Arguably, I kind of had a sense that Dorian was going to be the man to beat coming off second in 1991 at the Olympia. But in 92, Dorian won. So now we're into 1993. And here's my chance to come in and beat Labrada, who I thought if I beat Labrada, I'm going to be in the Olympia conversation again. But I'd love to get Kevin Levrone in my rearview mirror, right? And that was, I think, the year that Kevin Levrone tore his pec.
Yeah, in January. Yeah,
tore his pec, and I was there training with Flex Wheeler for the '93 Arnold Classic. I had a taste of victory. He witnessed, that victorious win, and that shared in some fun with me. And when he won the 1993 Arnold Classic, I felt like I won the '93 Arnold Classic because I trained with him. I saw him suffer. Flex Wheeler suffers for bodybuilding shows more than any other bodybuilder you'll ever know, because he's got to do some drastic last-minute shit that none of us are willing to do. Flex would be doing 3 hours of cardio, training twice a day.
Why is that, Shawn? Was he cheating on his diet or what?
Yeah, he wasn't very good with his diet. He would do the work when he's there, but it was like slave labor for him. Mine, if you go back and look at those Battle for the Olympias that Mitsuru Okabe used to make, I'd roll up in my Mercedes or whatever car I was driving that year, but I would drive into those gym workouts like I'm ready for war. I'm going to battle. Mm-hmm. Like whoever's waiting for me on the other side of the gym, we're going to war. And Flex Wheeler didn't have that same tenacious attitude. And I felt it in 93 training for that Arnold Classic because he would get there and suck all the oxygen out of the room. As good as he was, and I knew he was going to be good, he would suck the oxygen out of the room at every one of those workouts. So training that close to for me, the enemy would allow me to get into his head a little bit, some of the psychology. And I would take the lack of energy he had and I would use it when I got up there. I figured if he would copy me, he would be that much better. And I would drag him through. I'd make sure Enrico and Chris and whoever else, we were on the Flex Wheeler bandwagon in 93, knowing I would have to face this guy on the Olympia stage. But if I could out-train this guy while he's training for the Arnold, I knew I could maybe surpass him on the Olympia stage just because I needed to outwork him. He would win the 1993 Olympia, and arguably I'd never seen a physique like that, up close and personal, change so much in my lifetime. And when that Arnold Classic was done in 1993, I felt like it was going to be a two-man show between me and Dorian. I thought I was going to leapfrog because I outworked Flex, and Flex just won. Like some people were telling me I should have gone in the 93 Olympia based on how I looked off season because of how hard we were training to get Flex ready for that show. So I had a running start in March of 93 to go into the Olympia. And I was sprinting to the Olympia. I had vengeance on my mind. I wanted to get Labrada, put him in my rearview mirror. And if I could do that, I'd be one of the last men standing. Along the way, Flex was busy. He would win 4 shows in 1993. He was named Rookie of the Year. And then he would show up at the Olympia, and he just had this momentum. All the magazines were out. Flex was on the covers. Flex. And I was coming from 4th place at the Olympia in 92. Kevin, I don't think Kevin even made it to the stage, did he, in 93?
Yeah, he was 5th.
That's how the pec tear really held him back. But I knew it was going to be me, Labrada, Flex, and Dorian. Those were going to be the last 4 guys standing.
What did you think of Flex's physique? Because everybody was raving about Flex, how he looked at that 93 Arnold. In fact, even today, like 30 years later, people are still saying that was one of the best physiques ever in bodybuilding. What was your opinion of how he looked?
That came from me originally. I mean, listen, I'm a fan of bodybuilding first. And Flex Wheeler was everything I wanted to be at the 93 Olympia. I don't think he ever superseded that physique. It got bigger. Yeah. It got uglier. It got suspicious over the years. I don't think it got better, in my opinion. Even though Flex went on to get 2nd place, I think 3 times in the Olympia, and he won a couple more Arnold Classics. But in 93, at that time, I'd never seen anything like it. Okay, so you're only as good as the people you stand next to. And that Arnold Classic lineup was not the Olympia lineup. Who got 2nd place that year?
At the Arnold?
Yeah.
Labrada.
So for me, that's how forgettable it was because it was Flex Wheeler from the start.
Yeah. Flex dominated.
Yeah. So Kevin beat me in 92. Flex just wins the Arnold in 93. Am I going to go backwards? I got to get Labrada. So I was training for the 93 Olympia, just hoping and because Labrada was comparable to me. Yeah. Not knowing that Kevin would get injured or hurt, but I felt like that would be a small victory. But now Flex is going to be in the mix. Am I going to go backwards? So I took that offseason training in 93 from March, and I put it into overdrive. And I got to tell you, and Jerry, you might, I don't know, if you had seen me up until that point, I saw things on my physique in 93 that I didn't see in 1992. And I was cocksure this was going to come down to me and Dorian Yates. When I hit my back double biceps, my glutes were great like Kaspari back in 1988. We hadn't seen that. My Christmas tree was much more pronounced. I had better control over my poses except my front double bicep, which happened to be Flex Wheeler's best shot. I still hadn't mastered my vacuum. I still hadn't mastered the control of my midsection in that front double bicep. And that looked like the USA trophy looked like Flex Wheeler posing for it. It was
right.
Flex's front double bicep was second to none. I mean, standing Dorian, I didn't even see Dorian doing it. Right. But in my completeness, in my preparation, I didn't think I could have been, and I don't think I ever was, as dry as I was in 1993. Flex was fuller, rounder, thicker, curvier. He had everything that I didn't have, and he had the hype on me. And I think he was the natural comparison to Dorian. And when I got 3rd place in that contest, it wasn't a bittersweet 3rd place. It was a humongous victory in my economy by beating legend Lee Labrada because that's all I wanted. So I couldn't complain about flex being soft in the hamstrings or in the glutes, which was my strong point. And knowing that when the back double bicep came, flex arguably looks better in the back double bicep. But
yeah,
from the bottom of my feet to the base of my neck, I was harder than flex was. But flex had me in the rear double bicep. And I think they overlooked his soft hamstrings, his soft glutes, which was his Achilles heel.
Mm-hmm.
But I felt very good after getting third place because I knew I still had a little bit of work to do. I got Labrada. I felt like I could exhale, and losing to flex in that year was not a slap in the face. And of course, I conceded to Dorian because I thought he was a bigger, better version than he was in 1992.
Right. Well, I remember in 92, that was the Helsinki contest, right?
Yeah.
I remember, Shawn, you were particularly annoyed about what happened there. I remember outside, your brother looked like he wanted to slug somebody. I still remember how pissed you were, really pissed off about that contest.
And Ulf will take the $25,000 check and give it to Shawn Ray.
Yeah, I didn't understand it, Jerry, because I'm always of the opinion that the most complete guy should win. I wasn't about Dorian. Dorian it was a natural progression after what he did next to Haney in 91.
Right.
He's the guy that could stand next to Haney. But I thought, Kevin was a little overspit from the Night of Champions. He looked long in the torso. His color was very fair. It was like, it wasn't even tan. It didn't do him any favors under those bright lights. And I also thought that he was very narrow in the rear double back bicep. That's where Kevin was his weakest.
Right.
His two strongest poses was his most muscular pose that he did often.
Yeah.
And his side chest. And I thought, those are only two poses. I think his rear lat spread wasn't all that impressive. His rear double back bicep, he was very exposed. If you could find a picture of me and Kevin doing a rear double back bicep in that show, I had him on the ropes. But again, I was more perturbed that Labrada beat me again than I was that Dorian won. And I think that you have to have that in you. You have to have that venom of being pissed off to get better the following year.
Yeah.
Which it did propel me to get better in 1993, the first time it was held in Atlanta, Georgia. And, I was highly driven and highly motivated. Lee Haney was going to be in the house. I was coming to Atlanta for the first time since the 1985 Teen Nationals. That's where I wanted at. That's where I arrived at the bodybuilding scene. But my sole mission going into the 93 Olympia really was to get Lee Labrada and get that feather in my cap, because I honestly believe that he was the best little bodybuilder next to Muhammad Mekhawi and Muhammad bin Aziza, and I wanted to be that guy. So it was a small milestone for me, but I felt like I out-conditioned Flex Wheeler in 93, and I had a strong case for second place.
But you were really, really disappointed that you lost to Flex, right, Shawn, at that 93 Olympia?
I was, because I knew things about the preparation for the show that the fans weren't privy to, right?
Yeah.
Flex was really lazy. I watched him phone it in. I watched him miss workouts. I watched him cheat on his diet. He's just such a genetic freak, man, that somehow or another he creates this illusion with his full muscle bellies of being complete. And I was just thinking, there's things in my deltoids, there's things in my serratus, my glutes, my hamstrings. There were things I was seeing on myself because I was disciplined and I was doing the work in the gym, that having this information, there's a little bit of resentment because it was easy for him. So for me, it was easy to be upset with him, but also to think that the judges don't see this. He's soft.
Yeah.
He's smooth. He's soft. He's smooth. But when he actually flexes in certain poses, he's able to hide some of that.
Right.
He's able to hide some of that. From the rear, it's harder to hide, but his back double bicep was so impressive that his narrow lat spread was overlooked. His hamstrings and glutes, like Lee Priest, were very weak. And I think they overlook that aspect of the game. And I was really hyper focused on that aspect of the game. And it takes a lot out of you to get those ripped glutes, to get those ripped hamstrings, and to be as dry as you can possibly be. So I felt like I outworked Flex, and I didn't feel like I got rewarded for that.
Do you think it was the momentum of him winning those 4 pro shows earlier in the year that maybe got him into second by a lot of the judges?
But listen, without a doubt. I mean,
Yeah.
you couldn't pick a magazine and not read that Flex Wheeler was going to be the next Mr. Olympia. Hell, I was telling people Flex was going to be the next Mr. Olympia.
Yeah.
So it's hard to be upset with Flex. Easier for me to be upset with the system, because I figured the judges won't give him a pass. But pose for pose, pound for pound, I felt like I outworked him and I outconditioned him, but there really wasn't the reward waiting for me that I expected. But beating Lee Labrada softened the blow.
Yeah.
Let me ask you, Shawn, do you feel that if Flex had put a little more effort into the training and diet, he could have gotten, let's say, the harder looking glutes and the let's say the parts that you said he looked soft in? Or is it a genetic thing where he just couldn't get it like that? I mean, was it because of his laziness, or was it some sort of genetic thing? What do you think?
If the 1993 Arnold Classic had been the 1993 Mr. Olympia, Flex Wheeler would have been Mr. Olympia. I call Flex
Really?
Mr. March. I call him Mr. March because he always peaks in March, right? And by the time the Olympia comes around, you've got all these appearances. You relax because you spent everything that you got getting ready for that show in March. It's hard to ramp it back. I know, because I did the Arnold 3 times, and peaking in March and trying to peak in September is really a difficult task. That's why I take my hat off to Jay Cutler. He won it 3 times in a row and was second 3 times in a row at the Arnold. Very few people are able to do that. Ronnie Coleman, Brandon Curry, Dexter Jackson, they were able to do it. Flex, on the other hand, couldn't really replicate the September look that he presented in March. And I think it has a lot to do with the things that come with winning. The weight of the crown is heavy when you're the champion coming off a victory in March, and everyone wants you to go to this country, that country. He has kids, he's buying cars, he's enjoying the victory. Now it's time to do it all again and suffer in the summertime, and you run out of gas by the time the Olympia comes. And so Flex's placings on the Olympia stage go all the way down to 8th place. He's fluctuated 8th, he's 2nd, he's 5th. I mean, he was all over the map.
Yeah.
For me, I think I got a little bit more consistency being in that top 5 for 12 years, because that was my focus, was just peaking that one time. But arguably, if you put that Olympia in March of '93, I'm not sure Dorian wins.
Wow. Even with the 15 pounds added muscle, huh?
Well, as good as Dorian was in Helsinki, Finland, he'll tell you he was flawed. He was thin. Dorian was thin. He lost a lot of weight from 91 because he knew he wasn't competing against Haney.
Yeah.
He knew he was going to be competing against guys that were smaller and maybe even more conditioned. But with it being in Europe, it might play to his advantage. It's a shorter trip from England over to Helsinki. I think he over-dieted. He didn't put the focus on his mass. And had he showed up in Columbus, Ohio in 93, Flex was – what can you criticize Flex for in 93? I had nothing. He had everything that he was missing as his career progressed. So that would have been a good, interesting battle. But
yeah, it would have.
For what it was, nobody really contested the 93 Olympia. I think a lot of the bodybuilders at one time or another have either been injured or they've been off. I was off in 91 when I got 5th place because I won the Arnold in 91 in March, and I just ran out of gas. I was guest posing 3 weeks up until the 91 Olympia. But what made that 93 Olympia special for me was obviously focusing on Labrada and capturing Labrada. And now I'm in the top 3 again. And it had been some time. People don't realize that 1990, I was 3rd place. Then there was 91, and there was 92, and there was 93. It seemed like an eternity to get back into that top 3. And for a bodybuilder, it changes the economy of your life, being in the top 3.
Yeah.
Instead of just being a top Olympian. There's some perks and some rewards that you get for being there, and we have to earn it the hard way. And I suffered. I suffered in 93 to try to hold on to the size and bring out some detail and learn how to perform my body. I needed to learn how to. I'm going up with Labrada. I was there in 88 when Labrada was he 3rd place in 4th place in 88.
4th, yeah.
Stood on stage with him, and arguably had one of the best posing routines I'd ever saw at that 88 Mr. Olympia.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a work of art. The 1988 Lee Labrada was just on fire. So for me, having start my career looking at that's the guy I have to beat, dreaming of being Mr. Olympia, but there's one guy I got to catch. And then running him down and catching him and having that validation, it changed my financial end of business on the Olympia stage. It solidified that I was a certified bona fide top 3 Olympian that could at some point have another bite at the apple and maybe stand on stage for the title. But now I had to turn my focus on flex and remind myself that Kevin Levrone, even though injured, is still dangerous. He showed up and he showed up and he got fit. It's not a career-ending injury. And so Kevin was not going anywhere, and I knew he would come back and I'd have to battle with him. We're all the same age.
Yeah.
So when I take Dorian out of it, I can't get to Dorian unless I get through Flex and Kevin. And so it set the stage for 1994 and all the years to come after that by having Flex beat me in 1993. There was still that filled up my gas tank to go into 1994. So 93 was a pivotal year for me in a lot of ways, especially beating Levrone on stage in head-to-head competition.
Yeah. Yeah, I got this Flex. This is the contest report from 93. I want to read what Peter McGuff wrote when you and Flex got second and third. So it said just about every placing from 10th upward had been booed, but a howling cacophony of derision greeted Shawn Ray's third place announcement. He shared the crowd's consternation and almost staggered as he turned his back toward the audience. For one fragile moment, it seemed as if he might walk off stage, and then Flex Wheeler intervened. Due to their conflict of 1993 Olympia interest, these bosom pals of a year ago had gradually seen less and less of each other, to the point where they hadn't even spoken for 10 weeks. Now Flex grabbed Shawn around the shoulders and held him for what seemed an age. Above the hubbub, he barked into his captive's ear, "You had me. They got it wrong. Keep your head. Don't walk off, okay?" Satisfied that Shawn was receptive to the advice, Flex let his despondent rival go. The incident spoke volumes for Flex Wheeler's character, as it did for Shawn's, and that his buddy found himself caring that much about him. So Flex told you that you had it.
Yeah, it was kind of a love-hate relationship. When I watched the rivalry between Muhammad Ali and Joe Frazier, John Jones, and on the UFC, the commentator, the black guy, I'm drawing a blank. Not Sugar Shane Rashad. One of the other guys he fought against.
I don't know UFC very well.
It'll come to me. I'm 58 years old now, John. When Flex embraced me, it was a relief, because I that last 10 weeks, remember, we trained for the Arnold Classic. It was gruesome, but it was something where it got me out of bed because I knew I was training with the winner. I knew Flex would win, and I knew I would have to beat him. When it came time for the Olympia in that summer, I didn't want to give him the energy. I knew I would carry Flex into that Olympia, and I did not want to use my energy to make him better when we're standing next to each other on that stage. And I'm quite sure, had I trained with him for the Olympia the way I did the Arnold Classic, he probably could have won.
Wow.
I did not want to get one. I wasn't on the payroll. I wasn't on the Flex Wheeler payroll. I got nothing. What I got was the satisfaction of kicking his ass on a regular basis. He will attest to that. Training wasn't his favorite thing to do. Me trying to make him quit and burn him out and do things that he didn't think he could do, that was victory for me every day while I was getting ready for the Arnold. I was not going to spend the summer of 93 giving him that for free. He would have been Mr. Olympia if I did that with him. I pulled away. So we didn't talk. When we got on that stage and he beat me anyways, that spoke volumes to the genetic structure that Flex has and that I acknowledged. I mean,
yeah,
beautiful physique. He got there through hard work. I don't want to take that away, but his genetics carried him into second place. He never outworked me in the gym. He'll tell you that. When I was announced third, he was relieved. I think he would not have felt any less if he was announced in third place because of the year that he had. He won the 4 shows, traveled the world. His bank account was full. He was competing with the world's best. Had we flipped places, he wouldn't have been surprised. I wasn't surprised when he wound up in third place either. So we respectfully, mutually, on that moment, accepted what was happening. And as I walked off the stage, I was like, I hope he beats Dorian, right? USA versus England. Yeah. I'm like, if Flex beats Dorian, it bodes well for me, because I knew we were at a fork in the road. We're either going to go with mass or beauty. And I was on the side of beauty. I was in the Flex Wheeler vernacular. I was nowhere in the Dorian Yates conversation. It was going to be one or the other moving forward. So when Flex did not beat Dorian, of course, I wasn't happy, but Flex was very relieved. Flex was happy it was all over with. And not for nothing, me nor Flex ever warmed up to Dorian until we were all retired.
Yeah.
Dorian was always public enemy number one. We weren't friends. We weren't associates. But me and Flex had this Joe Frazier, George Foreman type rivalry where we respected each other's capabilities, but I was not cheering for him to beat me, for example. I once I was announced in third place, I felt like, you know what? I threw a pity party for myself because I knew I worked harder than he did. But I had to accept the role of genetics, and he won on any given day. He's genetically superior than most bodybuilders on the planet.
Yeah. That's interesting that you say that was the fork in the road, because that was the year that Dorian was bigger than we'd ever seen anybody. I mean, we had the Lee Haney era where Lee was bigger, so I guess you could say size won over his shape during Lee's era, but Lee had the small waist too. But yeah, eventually bodybuilding went the route of the mass monster. So that was probably the year, right? 1993, because you had Flex, who had the great shape. You had the great shape. And then you had Dorian, who was bigger than ever. He was 257. I think the audience, from what I read, was in shock that year. So they went with the bigger. They could have went either way, and they went with the size.
Yeah, I think people have to understand this misnomer is that Dorian didn't have the beautiful physique like Flex or Labrada or even Kevin, because Kevin could hide some of his flaws better than anybody in the business.
Yeah.
And we're focused on the shoulders, we're focused on his arms, even his chest, even when it was torn. He didn't have the greatest legs, didn't have the greatest hamstrings, but he got in shape, Kevin did. With Dorian, we were all on a mission to stop this. We did not want bodybuilding to go this direction.
Wow.
And Dorian allowed some bodybuilders that weren't of his cloth to flourish. Jean-Pierre Fuchs, Marcus Rule, Nasser El Sambadi. These guys were becoming famous because they were comparable to Dorian. They weren't as good. They were not as good as Dorian, but they were his size. And so now you have a group of guys that are making guys with beautiful, shapely, conditioned physique almost invisible. And that's why I lobbied so hard. Back in the day, the first thing you saw the Olympians do was do the symmetry round.
Yeah.
We all walked on stage. We did the symmetry round for 45 minutes to an hour before anyone ever struck a pose. I lobbied long and hard with Wayne DeMiglia and pounded this idea away that people pay money to see us look our best. Does it make sense for me to arrive backstage at the Olympia, dehydrated, go in the mirror and put on all of this color, and then walk out there and stand up there for 45 minutes before I can do this? It makes no sense. The first thing that the fans see is one individual from the United States of America, Shawn Ray. And I'm coming from backstage, pumping up, and I hit my mandatory poses by myself. And then everyone after that, by themselves. Now we can call out, based on what we saw, in order, the guys that we think are the best. Bring out the lineup, do the quarter turn, and bring the guys out. That did wind up changing. I don't remember what year it changed, but you'll notice at this upcoming Arnold Classic, that's the first thing you see. Competitor number one. That happened because of me. Because standing there next to Gunther Schlierkamp, Ronnie Coleman, Nasser, I'm tiny. And an hour into that, my muscles are not going to pop. None of our muscles are going to pop because they've deflated.
You're standing there. Yeah.
Yeah, we focusing on trying to flex our quadricep for an hour before we actually pose our quads for the fans, so we smooth out. And that order did change. I forget what year it changed, but they understood the concept. But by Dorian winning, it started giving validation to the other bigger guys, and people wanted to see the bigger and bigger guys. And I knew along the way, Labrada, myself, Wheeler, we may not be able to last very long if they continually reward this look. as tragic as it was for Dorian's injury, we thought that would change the look of bodybuilding, and along comes Ronnie Coleman.
Well, Shawn, I wanted to ask you something. You have to think about this. It's a long time. There was a press conference. You were on the DS. Labrada was there, and I stood up. I asked you guys a question. I brought up the idea of having a lower weight class. I don't know whether I said 212, 200, something like that. They had that for a while, then they got rid of it. And I asked you guys, I said, I'm directing the question at Shawn Ray and Lee Labrada, because you guys have great quality physiques. I think it's kind of unfair that you have to compete against these guys at 40, 50 pounds, because it's very difficult for you to defeat them, because, they're just bigger structure. You should have your own. And what surprised me, I don't remember if it was you or Labrada, one of them said, it's not a good idea because it takes away from the prestige of the overall title. In retrospect, I mean, the fact that they created a couple of years later the 212 class, what do you? Do you still believe it? What do you think?
I remember it well. That was me. And years later, you're talking about the year 2005 when I promoted and put up the prize money for the very first 202 division in New York City. David Henry was running that show. It was easy for me then to make that happen because I was retired, and the smaller bodybuilders were getting overlooked simply for being smaller. Right. But where I came from at the time I was doing what I was doing, we were getting rewarded. We were being recognized. I mean, it's unfortunate that my career happened to come between three guys, Lee Haney, Dorian Yates, and Ronnie Coleman. They all share 22 consecutive years of holding the title of Mr. Olympia. And they're all three shoulder to shoulder, eyeball to eyeball, almost pound for pound, with Lee Haney being the smallest at 250, Dorian 260, and Ronnie at 280. That was the direction that the sport was going. Don't feel sorry for me. Although I didn't beat any of those big guys, I beat Ronnie Coleman for many years before he actually won. Dorian, when he arrived, and rightfully, arguably so, won some Olympias that were controversial. Lee Haney with Dorian, with Gaspari and Labrada nipping at his heels. I don't think there was much controversy there with his. With Ronnie Coleman, Jay Cutler's probably the only one that has an argument during his reign. I believe in 2001. But let's just say these are our champions for those three for 22 consecutive years. It didn't matter. I didn't win at 210, 205 pounds, but neither did Kevin Levrone at 245. Neither did Nasser El-Sabati at 280 pounds. Nobody won. So that argument for me didn't wash because I beat Nasser. I beat Kevin. I beat all the other bigger guys during my reign. What was happening in my retirement is there were no little bodybuilders beating any of the bigger guys. You would have never heard of Flex Lewis. You'd have never heard of Kevin English. You would have never heard of David Henry, Guy Cisternino, Sean Clarita now. I mean, those guys would be obsolete if we just stuck to the open bodybuilding, because Sean Clarita is not going to beat these guys that Hadi Chupin, Samson Dauda, the guys that have come behind when I retired. When I retired, it was Ronnie Coleman for 4 more years. But the little guys that created a career for themselves, it'd be questionable if you think Flex Lewis could beat Jay Cutler. I don't think so. I mean, so now that the 212 exists, there's a little niche that they can choose and find a way to be famous in their own right. The same way the wheelchair champion can, the same way our women's physique champion can. If we don't have the splintering of women's bodybuilding, we don't have women's physique. We don't have women's figure. We don't have women's fitness. So all of those things that splintered and gave birth to now 11 IFBB Pro League divisions have created not only businesses, but careers for these other athletes, multiple champions. I believe Sid Gillen has won 6 or 7 Miss Figure champions.
Yeah.
Right? We have the Miss Women's Physique is going back and forth between Natalia and the girl from Texas.
Yeah. Sarah.
And now the 212, Sean Clarita 1 year, and you got our other guy, Keon Pearson. So these titles it's making our sport interesting. Whereas with the Mr. Olympia as of late, we could see a new Mr. Olympia this year. I mean, that title is very slippery. It seems like every year that Mr. Olympia crown is going to different people, and it could potentially wind up in England.
Yeah.
Right? It could go back to Iran. It could stay right here in America. I mean,
although you do have now Derek, who won 212 and he won the Open. So maybe they're looking at it a little differently now than they were when you and Labrada were competing. But now you do have guys from 212 who can move, who can be competitive in the Open.
Well, to Jerry's point, there's a time and there's a season. They got rid of the 202, which I started for a reason. It just became obsolete, so they upped the weight.
212.
I think we're at a place in this era where the 212 can be elite because we have 212 bodybuilders that can compete with these guys. Derek Lunsford is living proof. His first Olympia, he was second place. His second Olympia became Mr. Olympia. Sean Clarita went and won the Reno Pro Show, an open contest, and beat Cedric McMillan, who won the Arnold. I think we're at a place in time right now, Jerry, where we don't need the 212 anymore. We can consolidate and take that prize money from the 212 and put it into the open category, assimilate the 212 bodybuilders into the Open Olympia. It's a crowded field, but make the qualifications a little bit harder. Our 212 guys shouldn't be categorized. I was never categorized. When I was competing, they weren't saying that I was the best 212 bodybuilder. They were saying I was one of the best bodybuilders, bar none, period.
Yeah.
There was no categorization of it. And I think that we are at a place in our bodybuilding industry where a guy like Sean Clarita in an Open Olympia can beat some of these guys much bigger than he is, the same way that I did, the same way I believe Keon Pearson can. But that will never happen unless that division is gone the way of the A-track. And we didn't lose a step when the 212 disappeared. Our sport hadn't suffered. Right. If you're a champion, you're going to be a champion regardless. I think some of our 212 are just as good, if not better, than a lot of our open bodybuilders. Derek Lunsford is case in point.
Yeah. True. Going back to that 93 Olympia, Shawn, what did you think of Dorian? Because, you know, he really set a new standard, gaining all that size. I didn't see that contest in person. So what was your impression of him, seeing him in person on stage?
No, I mean, I think, again, people are going to choose which year Dorian was at his best. Mm-hmm. But the gains from 92 to 93, for me, watching him, were the most impressive. Yeah. You know, I've always said you have to be a fan or a historian to appreciate what people are able to do with their body. I didn't really have any critique for 93. I said at the beginning of this show, the guy with the fewest flaws should win. I'm not a fan of Dorian's physique, but I didn't think anybody was going to beat him on that day. Now you start moving up, you get into 94 and 95 and 96. You can start to cherry pick the areas that Dorian had issues, had problems that were suspect. But in 1993, I mean, he was put together, and there was nothing for me to criticize, which is why take my focus off the champion and go for the things I think I have control over. I have control over potentially beating Labrada. I have control over potentially beating Flex. Dorian's the winner. So I got to find what breadcrumbs I could. And those were the two major focal points I had as I discounted Kevin because he was coming back from his injury.
So looking at bodybuilding as a whole, like what's important, what should be judged? Of course, we got the size, and Dorian was the leader in that at that time. But you've also got symmetry, you've got proportion, you've got conditioning, definition, you got posing ability. Do you think Dorian should have won any more Olympias after he tore his bicep? Because I've heard his argument is that, well, I only lost the front double bicep pose, but I win all the other mandatories, or I win most of the other mandatories. But just looking at it from a perspective of, you know, this is physical ideal. This is, you know, Mr. Olympia. This is the best in the world. Do you think a guy should win Mr. Olympia when he's got a torn muscle group like that?
Yeah, I personally don't. And Dorian's heard that from me in person on the same dias as we're talking. I think deep down in his economy, he probably would agree with that. But since he's a benefactor of the judges rewarding him, overcompensating in areas that, you know, it's not being scored evenly. Yeah, you have the best back. You got great calves. You got, you know, an enormous lat spread. But now we can start to pick apart the things that, you know, used to be near and dear. 93, he was flawless. 94, where did we start?
Yeah.
90, you know, I mean, I firmly believe after the 94 Olympia, or I should say starting with the 94 Olympia, that I should be Olympia. I believe that Kevin could have been Mr. Olympia, and I believe that Nasser El-Sambadi should have been Mr. Olympia during Dorian's reign. Right. So I don't think Flex really arrived on the Olympia stage after the 93 Olympia to be a threat for the title while Dorian was there. But I do believe that Nasser should have one. I think Kevin beat Dorian in 1995. I think I beat Dorian in 1994, and it's a coin toss in 96, just depending on how you look at it.
Yeah.
But again, that's me talking. Some people will take that and say, oh, I'm still whining about those. I'm not whining. I was there. I was on the stage. I witnessed it. I lived it. I'm a fan. When I'm looking at the champion, if I can come up with all of these things that are wrong with him, then tell me what's wrong with me, and let's compare from there. So I fell out of like with bodybuilding along the way in the 90s, and it was easier for me to walk away when I saw what Ronnie Coleman was bringing to the stage in 2001.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. I'm a big fan of Dorian's physique too. I mean, I think he was awesome, great bodybuilder. But if you go back to what bodybuilding's supposed to be, how can you give a title like the Mr. Olympia to someone who's got a torn muscle group? I mean, it just ruins the ideal, you know?
Well, I mean, and Dorian's argument will be, look, Chris Dickerson won the Olympia with torn biceps. I think Chris tore his pec as well. I'm not sure, but it was a different time. It was a different lineup. It was a different caliber of athletes he was standing next to. Dorian, you got to give him props. His entire career, he was up against Hall of Fame bodybuilders. I was up against Hall of Fame bodybuilders.
Yeah.
But Dorian benefited from a judging system that was changing. The 90s, it was full blown, man.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think starting after the 1990 drug tested Olympia, and a lot of people don't realize this, but Dorian could have done that 1990 Olympia. He lost to Benaziza at the Night of Champions.
Yeah.
In 1990. And Benaziza failed the steroid test in 1990 at the Olympia, which is why you didn't see him. He didn't choose to sit it out. He failed the steroid test. I just want to clarify that for some people wondering where Benaziza was, because I was looking for his ass.
I interviewed Dorian and I asked him why he didn't do the 90 Olympia. And he said because of the drug testing, he didn't really know much about that. He didn't know how to pass it, so he just sat it up.
I give him props. He did the right thing. It saved a lot of face. But, for me, I was a bodybuilder first, right? I mean, either you got to adapt and adjust and do what you do to bodybuild. I wanted to be in the Mr. Olympia.
Yeah.
So they got testing back before the show. And some people chose not to do it because of that. And I think Dorian was a benefactor by waiting for the 91 Olympia to roll around and serve notice to Lee Haney. And I wanted vengeance, so I went back to Columbus, Ohio, and exacted vengeance on that stage. I don't think Mike Ashley was in the 91 Olympia, Arnold. I think he hurt his knee then.
Yeah, he wasn't, no.
But who was not in the 91 Olympia that should have been? I think everybody was there that signed up for it. Gaspari was there, right?
Yeah, he was like 10th.
Yeah, that was the beginning of his downfall. Gaspari was on the way out because he'd been
he was fifth the year before when it was drug tested.
Yeah, he was. I think he started getting injuries. Knock on wood, I never did get injured to any significance as a bodybuilder and even in retirement. But I was a part of a revolutionary change in the 90s that we all bore witness to. And there's a reason we know who Gunther Schlierkamp is, and Marcus Rule, and Nasser El Sambadi, and JP Fuchs, and even Greg Kovacs out of Canada. And I thought if they reward these looks, we will lose the smaller guys, and the grace and the beauty would dissipate. And of course, on my departure in 2001, we thought Dexter Jackson would carry the torch, and Melvin Anthony and Richard Jones. There's always a new generation of bodybuilders coming in. The only thing that dissipated was the size quality, because you started having shorter guys that were bigger, but you didn't have bigger guys, right? I mean, Hadi Chupin is 5'6", but he's 245.
Right.
And he's starting to get pretty boxy, right?
Yeah.
He's almost boxy. What we did lose in the absence of the shapelier bodybuilder is the symmetry and the presentation. They're gone.
Yep.
They don't. I can't give you a name right now of somebody unless they're in classic physique. So now we're left with the best of what's left, and that's why I think it's easier to wind up with a guy like a Derek Lunsford over some of the other guys that there's a hodgepodge of muscle. Yeah, they're 285 on stage, but it's put together wrong. Presentation is gone. I think we don't see as many bodybuilders up there with muscle tears that we witnessed in the past, but we lost the symmetry. I think we lost the conditioning, and we lost the presentation. And I think we're in a transition period right now, in the transition cycle, where we can wind up with potentially another 300-pound Mr. Olympia by virtue of nobody else standing next to him to equal him. Samson Dawada, is that his last name? Dowda,
yeah.
he's on an island on that Olympia stage. There's only one guy as tall as him, and that's Andrew Jack. And Andrew, for what it's worth, is a slimmer version.
Mm-hmm.
The legs aren't as prominent, but Samson in 2 weeks is going to show us who he is standing next to Hadi Chupin. It's going to be a sneak peek preview into what the Mr. Olympia is going to look like when Derek Lunsford stands on stage, because Derek and Hadi are now the Dorian Yates and Nasser El-Sambadi of 1996 when I was there. Dorian, I was second, and Nasser was third. It was a weird placing.
Yeah.
They corrected it in 97 by going Dorian, Nasser, and Ray. But I'm curious if they would go Derek, Samson, and Hadi. It stands to reason either Samson's going to be first or third with those two guys next to him.
Yeah, yeah.
So the pendulum could swing all the way back around because Samson's every bit of a mass monster.
Yeah.
At 6'1".
So do you think, Shawn, that the Mr. Olympia has been more competitive than in the past? In other words, in the sense that when I wrote for Weider, when I used to write my Mr. Olympia reports, I pointed out how the incumbent Mr. Olympia almost has a 10-point lead as soon as they open the curtains, because he more or less sets the standard for the rest of the guys. So, it's like the old saying in boxing, you can't decision the champion, you have to knock him out. In other words, unless the incumbent Mr. Olympia has declined in conditioning where it's noticeable, or some other guy has noticeably improved, the Mr. Olympia usually wins over and over, like Lee Haney did. So do you think that the way it is now with these guys, being a little bit different, is it more competitive where we could possibly see like a new Mr. Olympia every year?
That's what we're saying.
Or is it, in other words, is this the end of the era of the multi Mr. Olympia winning like Ryan Coleman and
so.
Lee Haney, 87, 8, what do you think about that?
Well, again, and I always have to come back to myself and my own experience, right? When I left the Olympia stage in 2001, you're right. Mr. Olympia starts off with a 10-point lead. We had to chase him down.
Right.
Cutler, after prejudging, was leading by 4 or 6 points. Jay was, after prejudging, was beating Ronnie Coleman. And Ronnie Coleman came back to win by the widest of margins. I'm not sure how that happened, but maybe because he started off with a 10-point lead, like you said. Today, and I haven't missed the Mr. Olympia since 1988, I could not take a $1 bill and put it on the reigning Mr. Olympia as a guarantee for victory. This is not a title that Derek Lunsford owns by any stretch of the imagination. The same way I didn't think Hadi the year before owned it. And before that, when Big Ramy was owning it. I don't think there's no one as dominant right now that can say that we can phone it in.
Mm-hmm.
I felt that way at the beginning of Ronnie's career, that he's going to be here for a long time. I felt, Jay Cutler, when he got there, I thought he's arrived. He'll be there for a long time. He got upset by Victor Martinez, who we didn't expect, or not Victor Martinez, but by Phil Heath, who we did not expect to arrive as quickly as he did. Phil matured very fast, and Phil came into the fray. Dexter Jackson caught Jay Cutler when he was off. I think Dexter will say, I didn't beat Jay Cutler. I caught him when he was off. I think that's what Dexter would agree to.
Yeah.
The same way that Jay says, I didn't beat Ronnie Coleman. I caught Ronnie Coleman when he was off. This is a scenario going into this show, even though Derek is taking a full year to recover, and Samson is out there doing the Arnold in 2 weeks and the Arnold in the UK in his backyard 2 weeks later. I think that works to Samson's advantage. He doesn't allow himself time to get too far away from competition weight, which he'll be able to train and mature his muscles better. He's a bigger bodybuilder. He needs to stay on his diet. He needs to stay closer to target rate. And I think he will understand the gravity of the situation, that he only has to win the Olympia one time to make history and be done. Derek, I believe, is a new father. Derek is experiencing what I predicted when he turned pro at the USA. I was interviewing him for Muscular Development Magazine, that he'd be a future Olympia winner. Encouraged him to go into the open category where he got second. When he won, I was no surprise. I don't know that he believes that at his young age that he's at his best and he's reached his potential. Sometimes you can overtrain when you think that way. Samson Duwada, because he's got much more volume like Ronnie Coleman, It's taking him longer to get, but he's arriving now. And when he arrives, he's going to be head and shoulders above the competition with Hadi and with Derek. He's going to be able to make significant improvements that we're not going to be able to see on Hadi and Derek because they're smaller. You didn't really see me and Labrada and Benaziza. None of us really made improvements after about 5 years of being there that was significant. But on the bigger bodybuilder, you can see it, especially when they adjust their diets properly and they grow into their physique. And Samson is peaking at the right time. If I did have that dollar I wanted to bet on the Olympia, that's where I'd place my bet.
Hey, Shawn, I wanted to ask you, you were talking about how what you suggested to D'Amelia changed the judging order, which I think I agree with you. I think that was a good idea, doing the mandatories first. But now it seems like they don't really do the relaxed round. They don't have a separate round for it anymore. And if you go way back to the 80s, they used to judge that round. They used to have 3 rounds of judging and they had 3 scores, you know. So they don't really judge the symmetry. And like you said, the presentation, the posing, they don't judge that except for the Arnold. So how important do you think that is? Because the way I look at bodybuilding is there's different aspects of a physique. It's not just the size and the condition. It's also symmetry. It's also proportion, the structure. And then I think the presentation is a thing on its own that's very important, that's kind of overlooked now. So how important do you think those 2 rounds are, the symmetry round and the posing round?
I mean, when I was competing, it was everything.
Yeah.
I mean, you have shape and symmetry or you don't. And that round should count for something. I think that the more things we take away from actually scoring a physique, the more we should just get to the trophy presentation, because we know there's not going to be quality routines. We know there's no choreography. We know there's no entertainment value. So let's just come out and hit the mandatory poses and call pose down. That's where we're headed.
Yeah, I know. Well, it seems like that's how they're judging it now. With this, they just go by the 7 poses. They just go by those, and they're almost like scoring it like you would score a baseball game or a football game. It's like, well, he wins 5-2, or this guy wins 4 poses to 3 poses. But there's more to bodybuilding than that. There's symmetry, there's presentation, there's proportion. It's not just 7 poses, you know?
Yeah, and I get into that conversation with historians. I get into those conversations with retired bodybuilders, because that's what we thought it was. And that's what it
right.
That's what it was. That's what made us passionate. But now the guys realize that it's all about the mandatory poses. They also know that they're up against a time constraint. They also know that they're standing on stage, you know, sometimes 20, 30 guys deep. So when you have that deep of a lineup, it seems like it's more rushed.
Yeah.
We don't have the time to see these individuals do the 1.5-minute solo prejudging routine. We don't have time for everyone to come out and hit their poses and do
because of all the divisions.
Because of the divisions, the time constraints, and the time schedule. There's other things happening Olympia weekend that it seems like the Mr. Olympia, we got to get to it. And then, you know, it's the last thing that happens, which is why we get out so late. And we're making more noise, and I'm hoping that they're listening to try to address that. I think the weekend of the Mr. Olympia, I think should start with the Mr. Olympia, which means after you do your welcoming, after you do your acknowledgments, competitor number 1 from Egypt, John Doe. That's why we're there, right? And now we're at the 7 o'clock hour, right? We're getting fed our main course at 7 o'clock, which is why we're there. And then have a round or 2 of a different division, come back and get your Mr. Olympia done with. And then you can have all the miscellaneous extra window dressing. And that way, people that come for the meat and potatoes can get out of there at a regular hour and enjoy the weekend. I think holding them hostage to the end of the night, it's midnight, you know, you lose a lot of your audience. You don't have the stamina. You get fatigued sitting. You get hungry. Being an older person now, my concentration levels wane, and by the time they're announcing the champion, I'm not that excited anymore. So I think they've got to find a way to put the genie back in the bottle, and speed things up a little bit, and really make the focus that when we crown Mr. Olympia, everyone is in the house watching it, instead of going home and getting in my hotel room and looking for the results.
Well, that article I read about the 93 Olympia, it said the prejudging had like, I think 15 comparisons for the mandatories and like 22 comparisons for the relaxed round.
A lot of work.
A lot of judging. They spent a lot of time at that prejudging. They really looked at, calling up 3 people at a time, different judges offering, they want this guy, they want this guy. So they really, really took their time and really looked at the physiques. And now, like you said, they just get right to the mandatory pose, and there's no symmetry round. They don't do that anymore. They don't call comparisons for that. So it's over quick,
Hey,
Yeah,
Shawn, when
As get older, we know changes. We don't appreciate the changes. Sorry, I got an incoming call. I send it to voicemail. Still here?
Yeah, you're good.
We oftentimes forget that we have to evolve with the times. The Olympia is a bigger, more lucrative, more inclusive production than it was in the early 90s, 93 especially. In 1993, I believe we only had men's bodybuilding, women's bodybuilding, and women's fitness.
That was it.
That was it. That's it. So we can give the athletes a better look. We can spend more time, and we can actually enjoy it. It's memorable. It's very vivid. But you go to the 2023 Olympia, and it's over a 3-4 day period when you count the amateurs and the size of the expo that was barely present in 93. It is a production, and we have to adjust with it. I think the same can be said for when you watch the Super Bowl, right? The Super Bowl halftime production dwarfs the productions that they had back in the 80s and the 90s.
Yeah.
And the cost of a Super Bowl ticket. So the cost of the Olympia it's daunting when you realize how much it costs to put that production on.
Yeah.
So there's pluses and minuses, good and bad. I think the older we get, the more nostalgic we get.
Now they want to add even more divisions. I saw somebody sent something to me about a men's wellness contest that was held in Brazil.
Yeah.
I mean,
that's not part of the NPC though.
I still don't understand the point of the women's wellness. What is that being judged on? I mean, most of the women, they're very attractive women, don't get me wrong, and they're in good shape. It seems to be that they're judging them on their glutes. And my question is, what does that have to do with wellness? And that also begs the question, how do you judge a men's wellness contest? What would you be judging it on?
Well, I on a previous podcast that, we have the Miss Universe contest, right?
Right.
They also have the Miss Universe trans contest.
Oh.
And if I didn't tell you it was trans, you might not know.
Right.
So right now we're living in a day and age where, there's divisions for everyone. If it's not your thing, you don't have to change the channel, right? The IFBB is not behind men's wellness. I can tell you that on good authority.
Yeah.
The women's wellness, while some people don't understand it, it has given some longevity to girls that are fuller and thicker and more rounder and can't get down and slim as the bikini girls. If you look at our bikini champions, they're very thin, they're very dainty females. They're not that heavy. I mean, I don't know what they weigh, but I don't think many of them are more than 225 or 230 at the max. Some of our women's wellness, they're solid. They got some solid legs. They got solid glutes. They got shoulders. If you look at it in totality, there's some girls that just can't get lean enough to be in a bikini. And if they do, they look like bodybuilders. So I'm not opposed to that. And it's very fit because they look healthier. They look fuller. They don't look so emaciated. That division's fine. If the men wellness ever caught fire, they're going to have to find a home for that. And I don't know that that's going to be here in the IFBB Pro League, but if they find enough competitors, they're going to have their show. And look, it's not a show that I'm going to buy a ticket to. But hey, to each his own.
Right.
Well, they had a picture of a person who won the men's wellness that was sent to me, and it kind of looked like what they described today as non-binary. In other words, when you look at this photo, he was wearing what looked like a woman's bikini bottom, and the pose he was in is a typical pose that women would do. And I'm looking at the guy's face, the way his hair was. I said, this is one of these non-binary guys. I'm thinking maybe this is a contest, like you just mentioned, the Trans Miss Universe. Maybe this division is for those people, and that's fine and dandy for them. It's
not going to home in the IFBB Pro League. Jim Mannion, they're not interested. Look,
I think it's just in Brazil.
Yeah.
Sport, Jerry, we're seeing everything. How long ago? Can you imagine in the 90s that you would have a TRT company basically giving you prescribed growth hormone or sponsoring a show. You can imagine driving down the street in the 90s and there's a marijuana shop on the corner and you can actually go buy a bowl. I mean, you have that, you have the teeth whitening, you have the hair restoration going on, you have the BBL, the Brazilian butt lifts. I mean, everything goes right now. It's longevity, it's health and wellness. It's an influx of money that's coming into our industry for people that want to look and feel a different way. I mean, this is a sport where body dysmorphia is welcome, and it has a home. It has a home in our sport. And when you start talking about a men's wellness, it has a platform. I'm not surprised. They could have the gay Mr. Universe contest. I don't necessarily want to go watch the gay Mr. Universe, but I guarantee they'll probably have an audience for someone.
Wait a minute, some of our best bodybuilding champions have been gay. You know that.
I know. Here's the thing. They listen, the NPC created a masters division, right, Jerry?
Yes.
Before they created that division, Albert Beckles, Vince Taylor, all those guys that compete, Dexter Jackson, they would have all been considered masters, but they didn't have a place to be the best older bodybuilder. They created the Masters Olympia in 1994, Atlanta, Georgia. Right. Robbie Robinson, if they did not create the Masters, Robbie Robinson's not Mr. Olympia.
Right.
If they did not create the Masters, Vince Taylor doesn't have 6 Sandow trophies so they do evolve. They do create space when there's a demand for it. And while there was no demand for gay bodybuilders, they had only one place to go, IFBB, and we had some guys come in with some very good success. They could say, hey, I'm the best gay bodybuilder, even though I'm 13th in the Mr. Olympia. but there was no division for it. Yeah. And it was never one created. If it was created, they would have had plenty of athletes to fill up a lineup.
I'm sure they would, yeah. But
they may not have been received properly, which is why I think the wellness for men is going to be received properly.
Yeah.
Yeah, that 93 Olympia, too, I should mention, that was the year that, Lou Ferrigno came back the year before in 92. But in 93, I read in the article, he said he was 30 pounds heavier. It was 318 pounds in 1993. And he made the top 10.
So he made the comeback at 42 years old, I think it was, in Helsinki, Finland.
Yeah.
He placed out of the top 10. Yeah. I think in 93, he wound up in 10th.
Right.
And then in 94, he did the Masters and wound up second to Robbie Robinson.
Yeah.
Lou was all over the news the way that Flex Wheeler was in the comeback. Joe gave him a 3-year contract. He got that because the WBF was going after him in 1991-92. When he signed up for Joe Weider's Olympia, he chose the Helsinki Olympia and had a 3-year deal, which was a big deal back then. It was rumored to be $250,000 a year at the time.
Wow.
A lot of money.
That's a lot of money back then.
Shawn, speaking of the WBF, I'm sure they must have approached you, didn't they? I mean, what was your reasoning? I mean, because they were offering big contracts, I remember, to a lot of the top pro bodybuilders back then, and a lot of the top guys went over to them, as you know. What was your reasoning to stay with the IFBB rather than go in with the WBF and the big contracts?
So, I was getting ready I came off the drug tested Arnold Classic, which I failed. I'm 60,000 in the hole, and I'm training for the 1990 Mr. Olympia, knowing it's drug tested, knowing they're going to get the results before I step on stage. In the interim, from March until I think it was maybe July, this is when the WBF is trying to formulate. Tom Platz sets up a flight for me to go on Grand Am Air out of LAX to Stamford, Connecticut, the headquarters of the WWF.
Right.
And I meet with Vince McMahon, and he comes in briefly, but he pretty much put things in the hands of Tom Platz, who was running things. And they made me a 2-year offer. It was generous. It was $150,000 the first year and $175,000 the second year. I had a lot to think about because I didn't have any money at that time, and I was training for a contest. I didn't know if I was going to pass the drug test again.
And you just lost 60,000.
And I just lost 60,000. I had every reason to say yes, but in my economy, first of all, they want to own everything. Your 8x10s, your videos, your T-shirts. You couldn't make appearances. They're going to pay the $150,000, $175,000, but you can't do anything independently. And at the time, I was a very popular bodybuilder, right? I was very popular. I was on the cover of the magazines, and I had a very paltry contract with Joe. I think it was about $50,000 or $60,000. It wasn't much, but I wanted to be Mr. Olympia. And I thought, this is a concept right now that they're talking to me about. It's not an organization that's in existence. There's nowhere for me to make appearances. There's nowhere for me to sell pictures. There's nowhere for me to have publicity. These are all concepts that I'm going to be on a talk show, a concept that I'm going to do this bodybuilding presentation that's not an actual contest. It sounded too far out there. I thought if it's going to last, they'll come get me down the road. I stayed the course, moved up from 13th to 3rd in the 1990 Mr. Olympia, where they launched that information. They broke the campaign in Chicago in 1990. I wasn't on board. I got 3rd place. I won $18,000. I got a $20,000 raise from Joe Weider, but my mind was going straight to Columbus, Ohio. I got to go back in March to the 91 Arnold Classic and get that title and that check. So I didn't have time for Tom Platz, who was in the gym and would see me around. You ready to come? You ready to come? I'm thinking, I'm probably going to be the best they get because Lee Haney's going nowhere. He just won again. Labrada just got 2nd. He's definitely not going. And I just got 3rd. It's going to be me and Labrada fighting it out for the next Mr. Olympia. I'm going nowhere. So I called Thomas, look, man, I can't do it. I mean, the money sounds great, but I'm going to be Mr. Olympia. And I would retain the ability to travel the world and be my own marketing machine that way that we had. I wanted to go to FIBO in Germany. I had guest posing gigs, that the two, cash money. I just thought about what I was giving up to get this 150 grand that I thought I could make on the road. And most of it would be cash, non-reportable, non-taxable. And I would be global. I knew in my mind that the WBF was going to own Shawn Ray. I was going to become a character. I was a bodybuilder. I was a performer. I didn't want to be a character. And they were only having one show a year. And I just thought, I'm going to lose all the media that comes with what I've just accomplished. And lo and behold, I won the Arnold Classic in 1991. It went from 60,000 to 70,000. That was half of what they were offering me. Joe Weider gave me a $20,000 raise. I'm at 90,000. Now I got all of these appearances I'm going to be making. I came out with the Shawn Ray, I think it was one of my lifestyles of fit and famous videos. I had posters. I had weight belts. I had a deal with a clothing company. I had a Shawn Ray glove. I had 5 or 6 different sponsors because I was in the magazines.
Yeah.
And I was going on the Phil Donahue show as one of America's most eligible bachelors. All that would have been gone if I went with the WBF. And then Troy Zucolato dropped the bomb. He said, they offered me 175 and 225. I said, wait a minute, you haven't even competed as a pro. Matter of fact, your last win was in 1989 at the Nationals.
Yeah.
They're offering you more money than they're offering me. He said, yeah, I'm going to be the California surf guy, and Eddie Robinson's going to be the military guy, and they got Mike Christian and Tony Pearson's Jetman, and Mike's. I'm going, I can't. I'm not, I can't get with the characters, number one. Yeah. They offered $225,000, Troy. Troy had done nothing. He hadn't busted a grape. And I thought at that point in time, they could have it. I'm waiting to see what they're going to do at this show. Meanwhile, I got the Arnold Classic trophy in the check. I'm having dinner with Arnold and Maria, Tanya Knight. I'm sitting on top of the world. Lee Haney's going to, at the time, Lee Haney wasn't very good in Chicago in 1990.
Right.
So I'm expecting him to be off again in 91, but then we find out that they're no longer testing the Mr. Olympia.
Right.
And I go, holy crap, you're not testing? And I'm thinking that would have been working to my advantage.
Yeah.
And now this is Lee Haney's retirement party, and I'm in demand all over the country and around the world as the Arnold Classic winner. And, I'm not even thinking Dorian Yates because I forgot Muhammad bin Aziza beat him in 1990. And Dorian was the shadow. He wasn't publicized heavily. And, of course, I got 5th place at that 91 Olympia. I think I made the right decision, Jerry, because I stayed true to what I fell in love with. I didn't become a character. I didn't get caught up in a gimmick. And I didn't disappear off the radar. And I didn't have to go through the political reinstatement. All the guys that came back had issues coming back from the WBF because they were told by Wayne DeMilia, the dictator, if you leave, you're screwed. And no matter what you look like, I think Aaron Baker's the only one that came back with good significance. He beat Flex Wheeler at the IronMan in 95. Gary Stridham had a good return at my show in 2007, years later, or 2006 when I put it on up there in Colorado. But none of the bodybuilders were the same. Gary Stridham was the only one that thrived. I think he's the only one that maybe didn't get drug tested. But I did the right thing by not going over there for my career.
Yeah, I remember one of the Night of the Champions, John, we and I talked about this.
The last episode, yeah.
they set up graves on the stage.
For all the returning WBF competitors,
All the guys that went over to the, I wrote it when I did the contest report. I thought I wrote that was in very bad taste. I didn't really like that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It was like penalizing the guys, where if they came back, they were saying you're going to lose automatically. Don't even bother competing.
Yeah.
Well,
you're dead.
Well, to give context to it, the WBF got 13 guys. None of them were Olympia threat champions. Remember, Barry DeMay went over there with a torn pec and he never did anything.
Yeah.
None of them were a threat to the title of becoming Mr. Olympia. So they got the best of what was left. It didn't hurt the industry. It was if we go through the history, that period was one of the best things for bodybuilding when it actually happened.
It was.
Because Joe went a little further in his pocketbook. He realized that there's some vulnerabilities if he doesn't make things better for the federation. And for Lee Haney, he signed a 5-year contract with Twin Labs before he won Olympia in 1991 for $1 million, which is $200,000 a year, which at the time was a lot of money for Lee Haney going into retirement.
Yeah.
And again, if you don't have the WBF, we don't have that spotlight on our industry. That created a lot of interest to our sport.
I even benefited. I mean, that's the only time Joe Weider gave me a raise. In other words, like when the WBF started, I'd asked him for a little bit more money. He always kept, well, I can't do it, the budget, this and that. When the WBF started, he actually gave me, it wasn't a great raise, but it was a little bit more money for each of my articles. And he actually put me on the medical program, but I had to pay it myself, of course. Yeah. But I mean, I'm kind of underscoring your point that a lot of people benefited because Joe saw a threat for the first time.
100%.
The man was a guy who actually had the money to do something, But honestly, I knew it was going to fail. Like you pointed out, but the character thing about, and I went to both of those contests that they held, and I said, this isn't going to work. It's doomed to fail. I knew. In fact, they actually, Fred Hanford was working for McMahon, recruiting some people. McMahon had a magazine also he tried to start. They wanted to come to Connecticut to interview, to work for the magazine. And what I said, I really had, after seeing the first contest, I had my doubts. I said, I don't know how long this is going to last. And if I burn my bridge with Joe, I'm done. I'll never work for him again. And I was getting along real well with Joe Weider, So I said, I'll tell you what, I'll come to Connecticut if you guarantee me at least a 4 or 5 year contract. They said no. I said, I'm done. I'm not coming.
Well, I'm not sure how much money that experiment cost at that time, but it had to be pretty significant. I know Gary Stridham. Gary signed a 3-year deal for $400,000 a year, so he got $1.2 million out of it.
$400 a year. Wow.
Yeah, $400,000 for 3 years.
And that was a lot of money for that time.
I just beaten Gary at the IronMan the year before, 1990.
Yeah.
I beat him.
Yeah.
So I couldn't get my head around how are you going to give him $400,000 and you're offering me $175, and I'm on the magazine covers and I'm third in the Olympia. So the justification for me was warranted to not go. But for a lot of guys, it was because they were going nowhere fast. I mean, Tony Pearson and Danny Padilla and a few other guys.
David Durth.
Some of them only got $50,000. But at the time, they were getting nothing. Aaron Baker wasn't even under contract.
Yeah.
So $50 was better than what he was getting. So it was worth the exploration. Not to mention, some of the guys just had way too much time on their hands to do nothing with the money. Mm-hmm. So they got into partying and doing all kind of crap that they normally wouldn't do. It was something that was good for the sport of bodybuilding, and it was a large sum of money that I don't think they ever recuperated in the WBF. There was no revenue coming in for those guys for the organization.
Right.
Shawn, when they were trying to recruit you, did they also say that they weren't going to do any drug testing? Because that was the year that the IFBB was right in the middle of doing drug testing, and I don't think anybody knew that they were going to stop the drug testing until maybe after the Olympia. But that's one of the things I read was that they were saying to the guys, all the guys they were trying to get in the WBF, hey, we're not going to do any drug testing. You guys can get as big as freaky as you want.
That was never in my conversation because I shut them. I got third in the Olympia, and I pretty much assumed I was going to be Mr. Olympia. I was 25. I was 24 years old. And I was wide eyed. I was going to be the golden boy for Joe Weider. And I didn't care. I wasn't even talking about the drugs. I knew that they weren't going to score the way a bodybuilding show's scored. It's going to be a show. I think they would have had legs had they done a television show out of this thing instead of trying to hold a live bodybuilding You can't call it a contest and there's no competition.
Right.
So it was a television show. It was like the Gladiators, and they should have gone that route and got the storylines behind the athletes at home.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Like the journey to the gym, the obstacles, the family life, and then sold it to television. It might have been something more marketable.
Yeah, then they would have built up like a fan base.
Yeah, and I mean, Tom Platz was, once he got his role over there, you couldn't talk to Tom. He was he had a cigar, and you're dealing with a Hollywood producer. It's like, all right, forget it. You can't offer advice. I think the best thing that happened was that Joe realized that there's a new sheriff in town, and he had to go in his pocket and pay some people what they were worth, and that helped.
Yeah.
I always, John, I remember the story I told you where Joe brought me in the office right after the WBF started, when they started signing out guys. Joe, I was talking to Joe in his office. He says, Jerry, you know what I'm going to do? He says, I'm going to give all the bodybuilders, I'm going to give them medical benefits. I'm going to pay if they want to go to college, blah, blah, blah. He's going to do all this. And then about as soon as the WBF disbanded, all of that went out the window. There was no more competition. You didn't have to pay any of that.
I tell you, Joe said a lot of what I think his heart wanted to do.
Yeah, I believe it.
But in hindsight, I think the practicality of it all, the generosity of it all, he couldn't take care of all the bodybuilders the way he wanted to. Like, he spent more money in places on our industry than he should have. Yeah. And then he held back money in areas that we really needed it. Yeah. For the healthcare situation, it would have been virtually impossible to create some healthcare plan for these bodybuilders, but it should have been a requirement for the federation for these bodybuilders to show proof of healthcare before they pay for their pro card. Like, you're going to be the IFBB Pro League, send in your health benefits that you have. We're not insuring. You're independent contractors. Right. Like Ronnie Coleman, you could be a bodybuilder and a cop. You're drawing two checks. Yeah. But you show us that you're healthy. You need to show us that you have insurance, or you can't be a member of the IFBB. Those mandatory points, Joe probably should have implemented. I still think the IFBB is not responsible because these athletes are reckless. And it's a sport of Russian roulette for some athletes. These coaches are giving bodybuilders things sight unseen. Athletes are blindly following the lead of some other bodybuilder's protocol just because it works for them. So the federation and Joe Weider could not assume that responsibility. But what they can do as a federation is require proof of health insurance, current health insurance, and proof of maybe a physical at the time we issue you your pro card. So we know you're healthy. When I played Pop Warner football, I had to get a physical before I could actually get my uniform. They had to know that I wasn't going in there, with some pre-element. In bodybuilding, there's never been a doctor that talked to me ever as a requirement to do anything.
That's a good point.
Shawn, don't you think they should do that now? I mean, again, the bodybuilders are on their own. As you point out, they're independent contractors. But I guess this would be the responsibility of IFBB. Maybe ensure that the guys get regular medical examinations and at least prove that they're healthy going in, because the way it's going now, maybe you'll disagree with me, I think it's inevitable that we're going to see more serious illnesses and possibly deaths the way the guys are doing the drugs now. And I hate to say that, but it's almost inevitable.
I think the industry is not responsible for that because it is individual. Some of these athletes, irrespective of their health, are going to do things that compromise their health. I mean, you got bodybuilders competing with pacemakers. You got bodybuilders competing with one kidney. Don Long was competing with no kidneys. So while we look at some of these people in admiration for the things that they're overcoming, some of it's foolishness because your kidneys and dieting and protein and steroids, it's just a Molotov cocktail. It's an accident waiting to happen. And again, you can get a physical in January when you get your pro card, but if you're not competing until July, who's following that one athlete out of the thousands of members? But I do think that, the simplest action would be send in your check for $200 for your IFBB Pro League card and send us proof of insurance. You know what I mean? Like, at least we know that you're insured, and we can say, as a federation, they have insurance. If anything happens to them, we have their insurance. They're on our stage. They're in our federation. We know who to contact if they fall sick in their hotel room. And those things do happen. So at least there's a little bit of protocol. And also, the federation knows who you're insured by, and we also know that you're trying to cover yourself. Right now, there's nothing. You're from Egypt, you're from Iran, you're from Brazil, and we don't know who these people are. We don't know what kind of health situation they're dealing with.
Yeah.
I think where change comes from. Change comes from not death, but from lawsuits. So if I'm a parent and my son's found dead, and I'm going through his phone, and I'm going through his emails, and suddenly I see he's communicating with a coach that's telling him to take this, take that. I'm going to drag that person into a lawsuit, and I'm going to say, how did this come about, and what was my son into? And I'm going to find out that he's involved in a league, and there's these shows all over the place, and this is what he's doing for this situation, and on this date at this place for these people. And when a lawsuit comes, you change the way you do business.
Yeah, but see, the problem with that, Shawn, is that the coaches, and I've heard them actually say that, they don't force, whether it's the male or female, they don't force any of the athletes to take the drugs. They give them their suggestions, whether they're paid or not, that's a different issue. But the point is, it's the decision of the athlete. In other words, they're on their own. If you want to use the drugs that I'm telling you, then you're on your own. I'm not responsible. I'm not forcing you. That's their defense.
Yeah, but here on the flip side, if you go into the bar and I give you a bunch of drinks and you get in your car and you drive off and you kill someone, I can come after that bar and say, look, you gave my son all this alcohol and he's driving. It can get messy when it gets into litigation.
Yeah.
But at some level, at some point in time, there'll be a parent out there that's going to come for that guy, who's going to point to the league, and the league's everyone's going to have to lawyer up. But eventually that will happen. And of course, the coach isn't telling them you have to take this or you have to take that. But the prostitute doesn't go looking for the John. The pimp tells them where the John is. Hey, he's over here at the Bellagio, room 241. That's how the prostitute knows to go there. So she's there on her own accord, but there's something in it for her. Right. Some of these coaches, you got the pimps and the hoes, and it's a dirty business, man.
Interesting.
That's a good analogy.
You know what I found out a year ago? One of the baseball players for the Angels, he died taking fentanyl or something like that. Sorry, another voice call. He died on some drug overdose, and for one of the very first time, they prosecuted and persecuted the guy that provided the drugs. I think it was like one of the janitors on the team got on the drug. Athlete took the drugs. The athlete died, and they got the guy. Incoming calls. Sorry. So sometimes you can hold people responsible, but the parent that's frustrated, the parent that's in mourning and it's lost and maybe aware of what's going on, they will come for the federation or they will come for that guru at some point.
Yeah.
And you think that'll change the policy, Shawn? You think that'll?
I think it always does. You get street signs and you get stoplights put in places where they normally aren't after so many deaths occur.
It's true. You're right. Yeah.
So we're living in strange times where we're going to see some changes come if we keep going down that road. At some point, some line in the sand.
Right.
All right, guys. Well, I guess we'll wrap it up there. Shawn, thank you very much for joining us on the show. It's always great to get your perspective, especially being at the 1993 Olympia. That was great stuff. And Jerry, thank you again. I think this is our last in review show, Jerry, so we won't be doing this again for another year.
Another year. Well, let's hope we're all still here.
All right, guys. Pleasure growing old with you.
All right, guys. Take care. Thanks again.
Take care. Bye-bye. Bye.